Greetings, friends. We scoured the entire internet in search of really interesting and frank reactions of foreigners to our country. And in today's video, we decided not to focus on any one person or opinion, because in order to be objective, you need to listen and climb the truth. And the more people with a wide variety of cultures, their own and special opinions on the situation, and a unique geolocation, express their frank opinion, the easier it will be to form a picture of what kind of Russia foreigners see, who have looked at it not on TV. Despite the fact that it has become much more expensive for foreign tourists to travel in Russia, the demand for trips to our country is growing. According to the results of last year, the tourist flow of foreign guests increased more than 3 times, including thanks to one of the previous introduction of electronic visas. Travelers from 55 countries, including the U.S. state, can get them. So what impressions about Russia do foreigners share during their trips, and what they like most and what is shocking? For example, in one of the conversations with a Russian travel blogger, Chinese Zhang, who came to Russia for the first time, listed the features of the country that struck him. First of all, a guest from China called Russia the freest country in the world. Although we note that he also managed to visit freedom-loving America and democratic Europe. But he had such an opinion about our country. Any Chinese will envy a Russian and say how Russians live and breathe freely. I have been in Tumen for more than a month and have not found a single security camera. Here I can be myself and do what I want, Zhang says. The Chinese explained that at home he lacked communication with the outside world, because the world internet and social networks do not work there, and local residents use internal services. I like that here in Russia I can meet and communicate with other foreigners. There are an incredible number of them in your country. There are a variety of nationalities and languages, and all of them, oddly enough, are in harmony with each other, Zhang admitted. In addition, the traveler said that the ecological situation in Russia is much better than in China, and admired the nature of Siberia. To visit the forest, it is the forest, not the park. 15 or 20 minutes is enough. And you are already surrounded by uninhabited nature. I like that you can just walk. You don't have to pay for admission or ask permission to visit such reserves. My friends envy me that I saw it all live, he explained. But another foreigner, the author of the blog Dutch in Russia, said that on one of his first trips around Russia, he went on a retro train Russian Alsky Express to Karelia and was pleasantly surprised. Since then, I have had many trips on other trains, but my opinion has not changed. This is the most beautiful train I've ever ridden, he concluded. Later, the Dutchman who moved to Russia admitted that he was particularly impressed by some features of our country. These include hypermarkets operating around the clock. And if you don't want to go to the store, then there's delivery, and the products can be delivered even at night. In Holland, shops usually work until 9 or 10 in the evening, he complained. Another advantage of living in Russia, the foreigner called free education at universities. According to him, in Holland each student pays at least 2,300 euros, about 219,000 rubles a year. And our next character, an American who visited Russia several times, called it the most interesting of European countries, adding that it causes mixed emotions, sometimes admiration, and sometimes laughter. A US resident said that he went on a road trip from Crimea to Sochi and managed to evaluate Russian resorts. The main advantage of the entire coast, the foreigner noted the nature, but the local service and uncultured vacationers disappointed him. More or less expensive hotels, decent restaurants and clubs, of course, there is some level here. Average with a stretch, but the prices of the luxury level. Poor Russian tourists who receive salaries in rubles, local prices. Ripping off, the American was indignant. He also added that he was shocked by the large number of drunk tourists and rude people without manners. Maybe the sea air affects the Russians so much, but what I saw upset me very much. As if I was back in the provincial state of my native country, the traveler concluded. Unlike the European manner of behavior of Russians, sometimes foreign guests have a lot of questions. For example, a Frenchman who drove along the Trans-Siberian Railway in 2023 year noted that sometimes Russians seemed rude and aggressive to him, but then he realized that this was only a style of communication and not real aggression. According to him, people were friendly, constantly treated him to food, asked a lot of questions through an online translator, and often asked if he was afraid to travel around Russia. During the entire trip, he never got into a dangerous situation and did not face hostility towards himself as a European. Another Frenchman who visited Russia, on the contrary, was disappointed with the style of communication of local residents. He complained that Russians often asked him tactless questions and climbed with unsolicited advice. Phrases, "Oh, and when will you have kids? You're not getting any younger, you'll regret it later. And if I were you, I would be skinny all over, I would have behaved at least normally," brought a foreigner to white heat. Although he tried not to show it, said a Russian travel blogger who recorded the impression of a European. Another foreigner, a resident of Germany, complained that some Russians did not give him peace with strange superstitions. For example, he was very surprised by the tradition of Russians to sit on the track. At first he thought it was some kind of joke. But when adults seriously forced him to sit on suitcases in the corridor, he did not understand what was what, explained the Russian travel blogger who talked to the German, adding that the foreigner had the impression that Russians are superstitious. But they cannot explain any of the rituals or give them different explanations. Our next character, the author of the blog, said that Russian Chris causes contradictory feelings among foreigners. So, one American said that the drink is similar to non-alcoholic beer, and he is not interested in drinking it. Another, having tasted Chris, began to constantly order it on the internet. An Italian who tasted cold Chris exclaimed, "That's how you should drink it." Before that, he drank warm Chris, and he was not impressed. The Italian also liked the Crimean tatar cuisine. "I especially liked cheboreks and yantik, which is fried without oil." A guest from Italy also tried pizza, but from the Russian dining room. At first, she alerted him somewhat, but then he liked it. "Simon was very interested in the dining room. He constantly asked me to go to them. So I'm thinking up what kind of restaurant would be so interesting to take him to, but he's a simple guy. Our canteens impressed him," writes the author of the material on the channel Here You Are Not There. In addition, our tradition of drinking tea often pleased the Italian. "I was particularly impressed with the assortment of tea in various establishments. The only thing that Simon could not understand in any way is how can you drink tea or coffee with sausage for breakfast?" The author writes, "How can I?" He expressed bewilderment. Among the sweets, he liked the church kala, bought at the Yalta market. In general, he eats little sweets, prefers fruits. He said that there are very good fruits in Crimea, much tastier than those sold in northern Italy, the blogger noted. He liked our mussels and rapins very much. Rapana is generally unpopular in Italy, so he tried them for the first time in Crimea, but I have already heard about them. The author of the blog also said, adding that the guest was also delighted with the flounder cooked by the Russians. We also found the story of a family from Estonia. A large family moved to Russia to find peace and tranquility in the Altai Mountains. Victoria Zhilutskaya's family moved to Estonia after the collapse of the USSR. At the same time, the woman's father was Russian-speaking, and the whole family spoke Russian all their lives. Despite the fact that Victoria was born and spent her whole life in the Baltic states, she speaks Russian perfectly. At some point, a real persecution of Russian speakers began in Estonia. And when it became absolutely unbearable to be there, the family decided to move to Russia. Now Victoria and her husband live in the Altai Republic. There are 3 children with them, but soon the family will be replenished because the woman is expecting a 4th child. Victoria has already received a certificate of temporary asylum. This document gives the right to work without patents, and in addition, it brings us closer to the moment of obtaining citizenship. I feel like a significant person, because being in Estonia, you don't feel like that. And here, well, somehow everything is native, everything is Russian, and the people here are different, the woman admits. This is far from a unique story when foreigners choose Russia for life. So, the American Tim King lived in Siberia for only a month and realized that the American television broadcast an absolutely wrong image of Russians. In fact, ours turned out to be very friendly and responsive. In addition, the Russians turned out to be much better than many other foreigners whom Tim managed to meet in his travels. But the last of our heroes today is the Irish marketer Garrett Johnston, who speaks Russian perfectly. and has spent a lot of time in our country. He compared Moscow and London, concluding which of the cities is better. Johnston called Moscow a great city with a high standard of living. Things are especially good there with public transport, service level, security, and digitalization. London is much sadder. The marketer said that the economy and security are worse in the British capital. There are big problems with the service, and taxes are significantly higher. Russia is still a very undervalued asset. Russians can't see it. It was better in the West, but now it's the opposite, said Garrett Johnston. In his opinion, by the 2035 year, Russia will actually feed the entire planet. Climate change will be a plus for our country. Most of it, and not only the Black Earth, will be suitable for agriculture. By the way, Johnston is a Russian citizen. He was a top manager in several Russian companies. After that, he founded his own consulting company of international level. The marketer knows 8 languages and works with companies from 22 countries. He has the ability to make comparisons. And so far, they are in favor of Russia. In one of his lectures, Johnston said that Russia will enter the top 3 economies of the world, and Moscow will become the richest city in Europe. Entrepreneurs from our country will have to work with people who have super incomes. The next 10 years will be a turning point for the Russian economy. During this time, it will overtake the economies of Japan and India. In the top 3, Russia will stand next to the United States and China. The reason for this growth is that Russia is the energy king of the planet. It has both technological and resource control of energy, says Johnston. There is no energy, so there is no digitalization, neural networks, robotization, modern production. Therefore, whoever controls the energy controls the whole world. Many foreigners who have checked everything for themselves speak about security in Moscow and in Russia as a whole. For example, the author of the YouTube channel Scottish Guy in Moscow. He lives in Moscow and claims that there is a low crime rate there. The Scot explains this by a total ban on the use and distribution of any prohibited substances. Not every country in Europe and not every state can boast of this. The blogger notes the low cost of living in Moscow compared to other European capitals, the high quality of services, the convenience of the transport system, the ideal frequency on the streets. Among the particularly important advantages, the author highlighted the commitment of Russian family values. This is the issue we got. Write your thoughts and opinions about the reaction of foreigners in the comments under the video. Do not hesitate in your expressions. And also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and Telegram channel and put your thumbs up. Have a nice day.